Hey everybody, ronarray here, and Harvest always been one of my favorite farming mechanics in Path of Exile. It can be good on so many levels. It is easy to set up on low investment and could be very rewarding with high investment. Lifeforce also will always be in high demand, because it's used on so many little things from crafting to gambas. Since 3.25 introduced so many changes to various farm-related aspects of the game, such as Scarabs, chisels and tier 17s, I want to make an in-depth guide for Harvest, covering many strategies and tricks for it. Check the timestamps as usual and let's go. Long story short, Harvest itself is a separate zone that can appear on the map and has a set of crops. When you activate them, they spawn monsters that drop Lifeforce. The core elements to drop more Lifeforce from Harvest are Packsize and quantity, with Packsize being the main priority. Packsize itself will increase the number of monsters that will spawn from seeds and can drop Lifeforce, whenever quantity will increase the size of Lifeforce stacks that will drop. Your maps have innate Packsize and quantity bonus that will improve with each modifier your map will roll. Some modifiers will add more quantity and Packsize based on their weight as well. Therefore, all Harvest strategies should try to improve Packsize and quantity as high as possible and run maps with the maximum amount of mods. It also leads us to a pretty interesting question: which Lifeforce to choose on the map? If you're not doing crop rotation, it is usually recommended to choose a pack of seeds that contains tier 3 rares or tier 4 bosses, and if both options have it, then it will be better to take the more expensive Lifeforce, which is usually Vivid or Yellow Lifeforce. What else can you drop from the Harvest except the Lifeforce? You can also get like Sacred Blossoms that drop from bosses and can be used to fight a shabby boss, or you can drop a divination card such as Avian Pursuit, even if the chances are not that high. Here in this video I will want to showcase possible farming strategies for different Harvest setups and I'll answer some basic questions. So first question is, what to prioritize on map? Pack size or quantity? Generally, pack size is more important, because you will be able to stack quantity while you are running the map itself, through the altars of Ether or Exarch, for example. So pack size is just an initial stat that's pretty much harder to push forward, and I usually recommend to prioritize pack size over the quantity when you are rolling. Is Harvest better on tier 17? Short answer is yes. Map tier will raise the chance to receive higher tier seeds, therefore tier 17 will showcase better results on average if you can run it without any issue, and some of the Harvest strategies could be done in tier 17 for better profit. Is crop rotation better than normal Harvest? To be honest, both of them are kinda good and it can depend on the situation. Crop rotation right now is more like hit or miss strategy. Sometimes it can hit big and provide a lot of Lifeforce, and sometimes you will receive nothing. And normal Harvest is much more stable and easier to use. However, it just don't have big drops such as crop rotation can provide. They both are perfectly viable and you could run one that you prefer personally. I'm going to show strategies for both. Before we will go to the detailed strategy overview, I also wanted to share my Scarab tier list in terms of how useful Scarabs are for Harvest. So first Scarab in the S tier, and the most important Scarab in all strategies for Harvest, is pretty much Harvest Scarab of doubling. It's going to double your Lifeforce and it also have a very low cost compared to some other options. So Harvest Scarab of doubling is absolutely great and should be in every possible strategy. Next S tier Scarab is pretty much Cartography Scarab of risk. It will give us array has an additional random modifier, and it's a very important Scarab because every modifier will boost our pack size and quantity at the same time. It also don't really cost a lot, and if your build can handle random modifiers, I definitely recommend to use Cartography Scarab of risk in almost all your Harvest related strategies. Going to the A tier, first Scarab here is Horn Scarab of Awakening. That way you can use Imbued option for Harvest, but Horn Scarab of Awakening has a pretty decent price right now, and it could be too costly, especially if you're not going to use it with a tier 17 map. It's also mostly used for crop rotation, because for everything else it's less important. So that's why it's in A tier and can't make it to S. Next one in the A tier is Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia. That Scarab has a pretty significant cost, but still could be used in some strategies, even in tier 16, while maintaining profit. It will provide you more bosses, and will give you bosses of all colors if possible, which is definitely not bad. But because of the price and because we have other cool Scarabs such as Cartography Scarab of Risk, it's much harder to fit Cornucopia in. Going to the B tier, here we have two options. Scarab of Monsters Lineage is going to give us 40% of increased magic pack size for our harvest monsters, which is definitely not bad. And the next one is Influencing Scarab of Hordes. Influenced monster packs in the area have 40% increased pack size. Influencing Scarab of Hordes is not working for harvest monsters, so keep that in mind. But it will provide you more monsters for your Ether altars, and with altars you will be able to buff your quantity. So that's why it's in a B tier. It could be useful even if it can't buff your harvest just directly. And Scarab of Monsters Lineage is cool, but unfortunately magic pack size is not that important for harvest, because we are going to drop a much bigger amount of Lifeforce from our rare monsters. And C tier is pretty much Harvest Scarab and Horn Scarab of Glittering. For Harvest Scarab, we just don't really need it. We can get Sacred Grove from our Mapcraft, or we can get it from our Atlas tree. It's very simple to get it, and losing the Scarab just to spawn Sacred Grove is almost always a bad idea. That's why it's in a B tier right now, and most of the cases it's not really useful. And Horned Scarab of the Glittering, been used in some combination with harvest strategies, however I don't recommend to use it only for harvest. Glittering has a very high cost, and if you're not using it with money making strategy for like tier 17, you're going to lose money if you will use it. So I'm definitely against it, and it's in B tier just because it can be in some strategies. But most of the time I don't recommend to touch it. So another important question is how to roll your maps for harvest. I generally recommend to aim for at least 90% of item quantity and 20% of monster pack size as a minimum. Perfect map for a harvest run would look something like that, so quantity is 118% and monster pack size is almost 40. But most of the time it will be just enough if you can reach 90% of quantity and at least like 24 and higher monster pack size. You can generally roll any map that you prefer, so you can roll like Strand, Underground, Sea, Jungle Woolly, or any other type of map just fine, without any kind of issue. The question is to corrupt the maps or not to corrupt the maps is always completely up to you. Most of the time I'm trying to corrupt my version, but it's not really changes a lot, and sometimes you can get a very high quantity and pack size even without corrupting. You can also run it with 8 mods if most is currently working good for you. Another question is pretty much what to aim at tier 17. So for tier 17 we have the similar goals, we just aim for higher quantity and the pack size. You can expect 50% and more monster pack size on a good map and at least 120 and higher item quantity. Those bonuses are pretty cool. You don't really care about Scarabs or currency bonuses, but if you can roll a lot of Scarabs, it could be good because you can make some currency with that. So I generally recommend just to look at the pack size, quantity, and maybe mine Scarabs a little. So let's finally talk about the strategies. I'm also going to showcase a good strategies for new players too, later in that video, so please click on dedicated timestamps if you're new to the game and you're not sure how much you're ready to invest in the harvest farm. The first strategy is very basic, and it works for both tier 16 maps or tier 17 maps. It generally requires you to run Harvest Scarab of Dublin together with Cartography Scarab of Risk 3 times, and adding your map, you will have one open slot. That open slot goes for Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia or for another Cartography Scarab of Risk. So generally, if you're riding in tier 17, I recommend to always use Cornucopia for that strategy. But if you are running tier 16 instead, it could be a great idea to hedge your cost a little, and instead of running Cornucopia, you can run another Scarab of Risk. That strategy could be a little hard for new player builds. So if your build can't handle a lot of random modifiers, it's much harder for you that way. You can pretty much avoid using Scarab over risks altogether and go for further strategies that I will showcase later in this video. But generally, I would say the setup like that could pretty much provide you with a pretty decent amount of harvest drops. And Cornucopia for tier 17 could be a decent option too. You can also try to use Cornucopia for a tier 16 strategy as well, but price of the Cornucopia can drag your whole profit down a little, so keep that in mind. However, that strategy is very basic and working in most cases. So your atlas for that strategy will look somewhat like that. You're generally just going for harvest chance on Call of the Grove. You're also picking Bounty Hunters and Bumper Crop. On top of that, you are taking Eldritch Gaze, and you will need to use Ether Influence in that strategy, so try to allocate Ether. And I also recommend to take Shrines, because in Shrines you'll have an option to roll a Covetous Shrine. Covetous Shrine can raise your amount like of quantity and rarity, which is going to increase your drops from Harvest, and it's definitely good. Otherwise, the strategy is pretty basic. You will need to take all increase of explicit modifiers to raise your quantity and pack size, and pretty much that's it. You don't need anything else. Don't forget to take a pack size for Ether World Influence packs, because it's going to provide you with more altars, and more altars will lead to more chances to pick quantity and rarity on altars as well. Another important option for all basic strategies. It is also recommended to just go for Wild Growth if you don't use Cornucopia. So if Cornucopia is not there, I recommend to just go down there and pick Wild Growth, because right now purple plants cost not a lot, and you will just lower the amount of them in the map, raising the amount of yellow and blue plants, which cost significantly more. But if you use Cornucopia, it's not recommended, so in that case, just drop those points altogether, and you can invest them in Scarabs instead, for example. So next strategy is Crop Rotation. For Crop Rotation, the Scarabs are pretty much staying very close, so you are still using Harvest Scarab of Dublin, you can use Cartography Scarab over Risk, or you can use Influencing Scarab of Hordes. All of those are pretty good for Crop Rotation. The only important part for Crop Rotation, you don't need to use Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia, because you already will receive cool bonuses just from Crop Rotation itself. So that's a very important part, don't use Cornucopia for it. And that's pretty much a Crop Rotation for tier 16 map. It looks like that, and it's pretty basic. The main difference will be in the Atlas. So talking about Atlas for Crop Rotation, the most important part is taking Crop Rotation itself. It will give you harvest crops and your maps contain only tier 1 plants. Harvesting crops on your maps have a chance to upgrade the tier of plants of different colors. So you also will need to lower the chance of yellow plants with Crop Rotation. Generally running it is a very simple approach. You can just run into the map and pretty much click the different colors, which is not yellow. And by clicking different colors, you will buff your last yellow set of crops. So you will need to click yellow crops last. That's a very important moment. And you can just run around, click your purple and your blue sets, and perfectly you will have only one yellow set. Yellow set should be clicked last, because it will level up from all the clicks that you used at purple and blue plants. That way, we are lowering the amount of yellow plants, because we don't need a lot of them, we need only one to hit big, and we need as many purple and blue as possible. So the rest of the Atlas for Crop Rotation stays the same. We are still going for Shrines, because Covetous is cool, we are taking explicit modifiers bonuses for the maps, we are taking Packsize, and other bonuses. I also still recommend to take Call of the Grove, because it's a very nice idea to save both craft and get a quantity instead of map device, or a Scarab to avoid rolling for harvest. So perfect example for Crop Rotation when you have a lot of basic crops and you have only one yellow crop. So we will need to take all crops like that to pretty much buff our yellow crop. And this is the main strategy for current setup. Next step is a complete different strategy, which is Imbued Atlas with Horned Scarab of Awakening. That's a pretty important idea that generally this strategy is mostly used only in tier 17s because Scarab like Horned Scarab of Awakening right now have a pretty significant cost. If you calculated the cost properly, you still can use it in tier 16, but I definitely don't recommend it. Most of the time, if you go for Horned Scarab of Awakening, you need to combine it with at least tier 17 map, and it works well with crop rotation. So generally, you will need to add tier 17 map, you will need to add Horned Scarab of Awakening, and you will need to pick a special map crafting option called Imbued Harvest. It will give you harvest an area have 50% chance for the unchosen crop to not wilt. Harvest plants an area have 50% chance to spawn an additional monster. So since unchosen crop cannot wilt in that situation, and we have a very big chance for it, like 50%, we will be able to buff our crop rotation even further. So we are still picking yellow last. Just add Horned Scarab of Awakening to your map device and you will have such crafting option here. I still recommend to run it with like Cartography Scarab of Risk, for example, if your build can handle it. And Harvest Scarab of Dublin is pretty much staying in the pack. With tier 17, it looks exactly like that. There's also some changes in Atlas if you will run it. So if you're running Imbued Atlas for Harvest, the biggest change that you don't need Call of the Grove anymore. You're going to auto get calls like growth in the map anyway, so you're going to have a harvest. You can pretty much save points by dropping Call of the Grove completely and dropping some additional chances here and here. That's pretty much how it will look. You will have about 10 points left and you can get those points, for example, to invest in the Scarabs, because you're going to run a lot of tier 17 mobs and getting Scarabs is always a great idea. So I generally recommend just to go for like Ambush Scarabs and Reliquary Scarabs. Both of them are good. You can also take 1 point to Cartography. So your final Atlas will look like that. We are still passing up to crop rotation through yellow plants and weird dwarf because we need to minimize the amount of yellow plants to buff them with purple and blue. Another prominent strategy for Harvest is pretty much to use only basic Scarabs such as Harvest Scarab of Dublin, together with maybe Influencing Scarab of Hordes or one Cartography Scarab of Risk to pretty much farm Harvest together with any other mechanics that you already enjoy. For example, you can run like Harvest and Ritual in combination, or Harvest and Heist, or you can run Harvest with any other mechanic like Legion, if it works good for it, like Expedition, for example. So currently in that setup, you just need to use Harvest Scarab of Dublin. You can add one Cartography Scarab of Risk, and the rest you can pick the Scarabs for your second strategy that you are going to use. So a lot of open space in there. Because for Harvest we have such options. That way you will not have a crazy profit, but it still will be profitable and will add some currency here and there. It's also very good for newer players because it can provide a decent combination of Harvest, which is very good, with second strategy that could work for you as well. In such case, your Atlas will look something like that. So you will just have about 100 points invested in boosting your map, some Scarabs and Harvest itself, and you will leave the rest for additional bonuses. For example, if you will decide to add Expedition, it's so easy to just pick all Expedition nodes that you will need for such approach. So as you can see, it's 126%. You can tweak it a little based on what you prefer to run yourself, but basically it's very easy and it's a pretty nice combination because you will have a lot of additional points. There's also an option to farm Iron Memory of the Sacred Grove to pretty much get the harvest. It works the same way as any other memory, you just need to click it on your Atlas and run it. The memories right now are not crazy profitable, but could be a great way to have a stable profit. Don't forget to color and chisel your map if you're going to run that memory, and your Atlas is not really going to affect it, so there's no Atlas for such approach. Memory farming for harvest could be pretty decent right now as well, so look into it if you're interested in such approach. You also don't need Scarabs for it, it's pretty easy to set up, but you will need to buy memories in a pretty big amounts. So talking about current situation and comparing current farming strategies, I would say the best idea is to use harvest as an additional mechanic for tier 17 maps when you're already farming currency in tier 17. You can also use it as an additional mechanic in tier 16 too, in combination with what you already prefer. Going only harvest with Horn Scarab of Awakening and Crop Rotation is a decent strategy, but because of the high price of Horn Scarab of Awakening, it could be less profitable than it's been before. So currently, I recommend to test all the strategies and to pick one that you will prefer the most out of the current situation in the in-game market and how it will transition to the next league and how exactly it will work at the moment. But all of them are viable. You can run Crop Rotation, you can run Cornucopia, you can run normal harvest with just doubling on a lot of modifiers. All those strategies will be able to bring you money. Thank you very much for watching. That's been my in-depth harvest guide, and I think I showcased most important questions in there. Hope it's been helpful for you. Subscribe for more RPG content and see you next time. ronarray out.